everyone, welcome back to another edition of Break the Ice. Mike Vogel here, joined by our crack producer, Zach Garrett, as always, and thrilled to be joined by esteemed guests and recent inductee into the Hockey Hall of Fame, David Poile, general manager of the Washington Capitals from 1982 through 1997, here to celebrate the coming-of-age era of Caps hockey as the Caps continue their ongoing celebration of 50 years of hockey here. And David, welcome to the program. And there's just so much to cover with you because your career, your hockey career, I feel like began with your dad's distinguished career in the game. He played for 5 of the original 6 teams, had his career interrupted by the war, won Stanley Cups, became a coach, became a player coach first, obviously, general manager, and the only guy, as far as we can tell, who was general manager of 2 different expansion franchises, the Philadelphia Flyers and the Vancouver Canucks. But we definitely want to spend most of our time talking about your time here in Washington. Let's start with when you were hired here, which would have been August of 1982, and Dick Patrick and Lou Strudler, who I know is a very dear friend of yours, right. And we love Lou. Lou's still here. For me, that summer, that's the Save the Caps summer of 1982, is when everything changed here. The team hadn't made the playoffs for 8 years. The Save the Caps campaign was successful. Lou Strudler started working here that summer. Dick Patrick started working here that summer. You started working here that summer. And it changed forever the landscape of hockey in Washington. Started a spree of 40-some years of which the Caps have been one of the top 2 successful franchises in the NHL. But one of Dick's first orders of business was to hire a new general manager. And he tells the story of how he used his connections in the game from his dad, his uncle, his grandfather, who have a storied, obviously, history in hockey. Talked to them about who he should talk to. Your name kept coming up. What's your perspective of how that came about? You were the youngest general manager in the league at the time. What do you remember about that time, being interviewed with Dick and Mr. Poile, and getting the job and then having to shift your base of operations and your families from Calgary to Washington?
Well, it was in the summer of 82, and it was actually early in the summer when I got a call from Dick Patrick, who I eventually found out that I said, well, how did you get my name, or who recommended you? And the name that he mentioned the most to me was Scotty Bowman. Yep. And so I'm forever thankful for Scotty Bowman for mentioning my name, and what a great source of a person to go to. So that gave me a lot of confidence right there. I was interviewed by Poile and Dick early in the summer. Dick had just made an investment into the team with some other people from Virginia, and again, it was in a terrible time because it was a Save the Caps, campaign, and nobody knew whether the franchise was going to make it or not. And I think Abe was looking for some more help on the hockey side, and Dick's investment got him to be the president, and all, I guess is the way it went. So I came to Washington for a couple of days and met with Dick and Abe and met with the board of directors, and we went over a lot of different things, and I felt really good about it. And they said, well, we're in this middle of the Save the Caps campaign, so we need a little bit of time, but we will be back to you. So summer went on, and it was getting near the end of August, and I had not heard back from Dick. And my boss, Cliff Fletcher, as the assistant general manager with Calgary, said, have you heard from them? Do you think this is going to happen? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, we're starting. I need to know whether you're going to be here or not. So would you give Dick a call? I called Dick. He answers the phone, and he says, I was just going to call you. So I said, okay, well, I'm calling. So where are you guys? He said, well, we're just working some things out, but we'd like a couple. Can you come in next week? I said, well, yeah, I can come in next week. But I said, the season's starting, like training camp starting within 3 weeks. He says, well, come on in and we'll talk about it. I said, well, we've already had one interview. If I'm going to come, I'm in Calgary. I'm going to bring all my stuff. I'm never going back to Calgary. I'm coming here with the intention of getting the job. Is that what you'd like me to do? And he said, yes. So I packed two of the biggest suitcases, left my wife and two babies in diapers, another hockey story, and came here. Abe Poile picks me up at the airport in a Mercedes convertible that we could barely get the luggage in. I think one of the suitcases had to sit in my lap. And we had dinner that night and talked about a lot of different things, Dick, Abe, and myself. And then he said, "Well, come to the office at the Cap Center tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I show up at 9 o'clock. I wait for an hour. I don't know what's going on. And eventually, I think around 10 o'clock, got called up to Abe's office. And it's just he and Dick. And we talk. They ask me more questions. We talk more things. And eventually, he offers me a job. And just as a side like to the story, he offers me a 1-year contract at very low dollars and all this stuff. And I said, "Well, I have a job in Calgary, and I'm actually signed for longer than 1 year." I said, "You're bringing me here for the franchise to be successful, to make it. Don't you think you should have a little bit more confidence in me than just 1 year?" So to make a long story short, we agreed, and I signed a 3-year contract. Then, as we were just talking, there's a knock on the door. And it's Lou Corletto, who is the PR director for the Caps. And he says, "Mr. Poile, he had a telegram," which we don't have these. He says, "I have a telegram. Chicago and Washington made a deal. Roger Crozier was the person I was replacing, and he had just made a deal with Chicago for Ted Boley and Dave Hutchinson. And Mr. Poile, what? And I told him he couldn't make any trades and this and that. So he asks his secretary if she could get Roger on the phone. She gets Roger on the phone, and then Abe looks at me and said, "You talk to Roger and find out what the trade is about." So I'm in Abe Poile's office on the phone with Roger Crozier. I know a little bit. And I pick up, "Hi, Roger, sorry about the job." And then he tells him about this trade, and again, that's how it started. And then it was Friday afternoon, and it's Labor Day weekend, and Abe's going to Rehoboth Beach, and we're going to have a press conference on, Monday, Tuesday, I guess. And it was just Dick Patrick and myself at the press conference. And I remember, the one thing I remember from the press conference is I don't know why I said this. I just said, "I'm not here for a good time. I'm here for a long time."
Well, you were right.
And so it turned out that way. So that was my start. I didn't know Dick before, but the commonality we had, as you teased there a little bit, is that the Patricks, legendary hockey family, the Poiles to a certain extent had my dad, who's a manager and a coach and in the Hall of Fame. So it was we had lots of things to talk about right from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, Dick tells amazing stories of riding trains and seeing his dad's teams plays, his uncle's team played. He was a rink rat. I'm imagining you guys had similar upbringings and backgrounds, and you probably moved around a fair amount as well. What do you remember about those days? Yeah,
I think that's a commonality that we had as hockey families. I mean, you talk about if you could go to University 101 for hockey. Yeah. Well, I think Dick had that education, and I certainly had it. I mean, everything was hockey 24/7, 365 days a year. Vacations were hockey schools or what have you. It was not uncommon in those days to have hockey players come over to our house at a regular basis for dinner or drink or media people or what have you. I went with my dad to the drafts when he was a general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, first general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, all of those things. And then I played hockey, not at the highest level. I played in college, and then I went to the Vancouver Canucks training camp as a tryout when I got out of college. So, I mean, I had a really good resume, based on my family and who my dad was, and obviously Dick had the same thing. So we knew a lot of the same people, and we had a lot of the same upbringing stories. So I think we hit it off not only as a boss-employee relationship, but as as just two hockey guys.
And even though you were the youngest GM in the league at that time, you still had a thorough apprenticeship too. You'd been in the game for like a decade, if I remember right, with the Atlanta Flames, who had moved up to Calgary. What did you learn about that experience? Because the Atlanta Flames were a pretty successful, I would say one of the more successful off the bat of those teams 7 through 18 that came into the league after the original 6 doubled in size.
Right. Yeah, very, again, like I say, I know I've worked hard in hockey, but hockey's given me much more. Just very, very fortunate. And I think things have to line up sometimes for you to get these type of breaks. For me, going with my dad to drafts, I met a lot of hockey people. One of the people I met was Cliff Fletcher. Mm-hmm. Cliff Fletcher, who was the assistant general manager in St. Louis to Scotty Bowman, becomes the general manager in Atlanta. He's living in St. Louis. He needs somebody to open up the office. He's looking for a young guy. I have a college degree. I have a hockey background. It all makes sense. Bill Putnam was the president of Philadelphia Flyers. He's now going to be the president of Atlanta. My dad worked with Bill Putnam in Philadelphia. He needs somebody too. I'm the first person that goes to Atlanta to open up the office. This is in, we have a trailer. They're building the Omni in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. There's a big billboard above. It's a red goalie. It says, "The Ice Age cometh to Atlanta. Get your tickets before the freeze." And it was myself and a secretary, and Cliff and Bill would eventually, get down there. But I was like 21 years of age, and that's how you get your start. And I worked for Bill, and I worked for Cliff, and then eventually Cliff needed some more help on the hockey side, and I got my chance to move over to the hockey side and set up a scouting program, which nobody had done before, and some different things like that just gave me some traction and opportunity. So I had a great mentor with Cliff in Atlanta. We had 8 very, I'd say, exciting years there, and very small staff. And then we moved up to Calgary, and that was a complete eye-opener to me, working in a Canadian city, and all the opportunities that you have up there. And that's what got me, I think, on the map to get the interview and the job eventually in Washington.
Well, and that's what you described is literally from the ground up, which it makes it understandable how you would be able to have the Predators hit the ground running 25 years later when you had that job. But let's back up to the summer of '82 again. So you're hired at the end of August, and less than 2 weeks later, the trade that changes everything happens. There's also a minor transaction that day too. The Mike Palmateer going back to Toronto. I don't know which deal came first, but tell us about just how did you hit the ground running? Because like you said, training camp was getting ready to start. Like there was not a lot of time when you took over. What was the process like in getting trade talks started with Montreal and Irving Grunman, who was the GM of the Canadiens at the time, and how did that come about? And where did the Palmateer thing come in? Did that get consummated first, or was it the blockbuster?
Well, first of all, as I said, I got interviewed early in the summer, and then I waited for like 2 months to get to come back. During that 2 months, I had lots of time to be looking at rosters and the Caps rosters, and if I got the job, what would I do? And there was in Montreal, there was some contract problems with Langway in their team, and that was everybody knew about that. So when I got the job in September, right after the press conference, I learned that there's a Board of Governors meeting, and Abe Poland's on vacation and Dick is not going. So I raised my hand, and because I knew from Cliff that was a power position, and if I could get there to get to meet some owners, get to meet some other general managers, that would be a great opportunity, for the growth of my career. At age 33, I walk into the Royal York Hotel, nervous as all get out, scared to death, basically. I sat down at a table, and Irving Grunman sits down beside me. And for 3 or 4 hours, we talked about trades and what have you. When that meeting was over, the Langway, as it's referred to, deal was consummated. I came back up to my hotel room. There's no cell phones at that time, no air conditioning in the hotel. It was still a hot day in Toronto. I had to stay overnight. My window's open. I called Abe Poland. I said, Mr. Poland, I said, this is David. He says, okay, what do you got? I said, well, I made a trade. He says, okay, what did you do? I said, I traded Ryan Walter, and that's all I got out of my mouth when he said, you did what? And there's a big pause, and I said, I traded Ryan Walter and Rick Green, and I got back Rod Langway, Brian Engblom, Doug Jarvis, and Craig Laughlin. Big pause again. He says, I hope you know what you're doing. and hung up the phone.
Ouch.
As a 33-year-old, 10 days on the job, that wasn't a lot of confidence. So I went over to the window, the Royal York, where I have 16 floors up. I stuck my head out the window and I said, yelled down to the street, "I hope you know what you're doing." So that was my start. So that's turned out to be pretty good, though.
And I mean, it turned out great. The team, we alluded to it a little bit. It seemed like it, in a lot of ways, when you came here, it was still an expansion franchise, despite the fact that it had been in the league for 8 years. I mean, one of the things that I can point to, this team right now is in the midst of a 10-game road winning streak, which is the longest in its franchise history. For the first 4 seasons, the franchise record was 1, and for the next 4 seasons, it was 2. And so this thing built up. It started, I think it was year 10, so it would have been your second season where you guys won your last 6 road games that season, and that record stood until 2 years ago when Peter Laviolette's Caps finally pushed that from 6 to 7. So just remarkable what you were able to achieve in a short period of time. But and kind of quiet the rest of the year. What was your philosophy in making that trade? It seemed like the impact was the goals against really came down. Obviously, you're getting a guy who was plus 78 and plus 66 in that deal. That's pretty rare. I've said this a couple of times this past summer. Anytime the Caps were able to add a couple of top 4 defensemen, as you did, as Brian McClellan did when he got Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen, and as Chris and Brian did this past summer with Matt Roy and Jacob Chikrin, good things tend to happen. Sometimes immediately, sometimes a little bit later. And so I think we're seeing that again. But it seemed like throughout your career in Washington and Nashville, you had a reputation for being able to identify and draft defensemen. There's a litany of them, starting with probably Kevin Hatcher, because I think Scott Stevens was a Crozier selection, but right on through Gonchar, Witt, et cetera, and then Shea Weber and the likes in Nashville. Was that the foundation of the game for you, or was that just your 2 months of study that said, yeah, this is what I need to do to fix this team?
The easy answer here would be just to say yes to this. But I think in my analysis on the initial trade, getting Langway and Engblom, that was for sure a something I thought was needed to change it. And as you say, the defensive part of the game, and then Doug Jarvis too, which is a strong player. And that, I think that was a exactly thought out, and it changed the identity of the team, which it accomplished exactly that. But you're right in it about the defensemen. It's not some other guys you didn't mention, like trades for Calle Johansson and Sylvain Cote, Ally Afraidy. At the second year, trading Brian Engblom for Larry Murphy.
Yeah, that's one I definitely want to get to.
Yeah, and then we got into to Nashville with Suter, Weber, and Yossi. We got some big guys.
Yeah.
I must be honest with you, though. I think in Nashville we've been looking for a center for a long time, and it just hasn't lined up, in your drafts or what have you. So sometimes what you want and what you get are two different things. But defense is a rather big part of the of the team, and we certainly see that with the what I'd say improvement in the Caps this year, and that certainly in the back end it's really looks solid.
Yeah, and Washington was looking for a second center to go with Backstrom for a long time as well. And let's talk about some of those other trades, because I thought one of the sneaky good trades, and another thing, you were pretty loath, I thought, over the course of your career to move first-round picks. If you were going to get value, if you were going to do it. And one of those examples is Dave Christian. You trade this would have been the summer of '83 at the draft, on draft day. Trade that 14th overall pick for Dave Christian. Trade it to Winnipeg, and Dave had the best years of his career here in Washington. What was the impetus behind that swap? Yeah,
that was you're right on all accounts. I was reluctant to trade the first round picks, and even sitting at the table that year, it was there. The deal was there, but I was wondering, let's wait to the pick. And I know that Brian Murray, as the coach, who, the coaches may not care quite as much about the total game plan for a 4 or 5 year build out, as a manager, was kind of eyeballing me like, are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? So I remember that, and I went over to make the trade, and that was a really good trade. I mean, Christian was really just a good player, plays all different facets of the game, just to fit really good for our team for a lot of time.
And then even though you made that deal and you guys had just made the playoffs for the first time, you're coming into that 83-84 season with high expectations and high hopes. It didn't start that well. It was, I think, 0-7, and you guys weren't scoring at all. The one game that you scored 7, you gave up 8. And it was a rugged start. And I felt like in those days, it was pretty commonplace for GMs whose teams were off to slow starts to find other teams whose GMs were off to slow starts, and there'd be a little rearranging of the furniture, or let's see what we can do to stimulate our respective clubs. It's something we don't see anymore because of the salary cap and other reasons. But I felt like those October, November deals were pretty commonplace in those days. And you swing that one with L.A., where Larry Murphy, who had been drafted 4th overall in 1980 and had a couple of good seasons with L.A., you managed to pry this guy loose at the age of 22. For Engblom and I think Ken Houston. Again, what went into that deal, and do you think that trade happens if you guys start the season, say, 5-2?
Well, first of all, let's talk about your memory is really good. I must say that. We're talking about 42 years ago and all these things, so you're doing good there. Here's my memory of that. I thought we started off at 0-5. I might be right. You might be right. What matters here is I got a call from Abe Poile and Brian Murray to come to his house when we're 0-5. And I'm driving on the Beltway over to his house, and I'm going, you got to be kidding. I got my dream job, had it for 1 year, and he's going to fire us. I can't believe this. Anyway, he calls over. It was kind of a pep talk and this and that, and we're going on a 7-game road trip is what I do remember. We're 0-5. We go to Pittsburgh. We win 1-0 on a goal that the puck doesn't even get to the back of the net, and we have a really, really good road trip. Come back 5-7. The part with Larry Murphy in this was we trade for him, and I go pick him up at the Baltimore airport. He gets out the plane. He's got his arm in a sling. He's got a separated shoulder. Oh. So he wasn't out very long, but he couldn't play right away. Yeah. So again, those are really good trades. I mean, Brian Engblom was a terrific player for us for one season, and he played with Scott Stevens, which was a terrific pairing for a young guy like Stevens and what have you. So, but Larry Murphy's 22 years old, and you can make a trade like that. So those are good trades to make. So, that's the thing about hockey. What do you know? If we'd started the season, 5-0, we probably wouldn't have done that trade. You're probably exactly right.
It's odd to think about that. Do you think that even in the modern day there's still that desire to kind of shake things up when your team gets off to a slow start? Or
no, exactly. It's really, as you said, it's more like the beginning and middle of November when you either lived up to your expectations or you haven't. Right now I'm my club is the Nashville Predators, and I'm still an advisor, and everybody said we won the summer with all of our signings and this and that, and we're 32nd in the league as we sit here today. We'd love to make it a trade, but that's not happening at this point. So maybe in the old days, maybe it was a little bit easier. Like we didn't have as much free agency, and and I think teams were certainly more willing to shake it up and make trades. Now you're signing players to more longer term contracts. There's no trade clauses and things like that. So I think the landscape's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Let's see about some of these other ones. The Bobby Carpenter trade too is one that's staggering to me, because this is a guy who came in here as an 18-year-old and lit everything up. Was a superstar here, superstar in the making, and had played every game, hadn't missed a game, had the longest consecutive game streak going, 300 and some games. Decided to hold out and that's another thing that GMs don't have to deal with anymore, that you had to deal with quite a bit over your time here in Washington. But Bobby decided that he wasn't going to play with you guys couldn't come to terms on a contract, so you sent him home, and we waited. Everybody waited. Everybody in the league knew that you had to trade this guy or needed to come to a solution, but it didn't happen until New Year's Day. And when it did happen, I mean, you got full value and then some, because you got Mike Ridley, Kelly Miller, who wound up being fixtures here for Kelly Miller for probably close to 15 years, and Mike Ridley for probably close to 10. And Carpenter's time in New York with the Rangers was short-lived, didn't even last the rest of the season. How difficult was that trade, and what made you know that was the right deal?
That was really, really hard. Again, I wonder if I would do it differently. Like, we went sideways with Carpenter contractually, then Brian Murray and Carpenter went sideways and things were said or what have you. I supported the coach, which I would always do, and I told Carpenter to go home. I thought I would make a trade within 3 or 4 days. The first 3 or 4 days, I had everybody call me. Carpenter's a really good player, young player. I thought, and I had all of these people calling, offering this, that, or what have you, but nothing that I thought was right or fair. And then it's like nothing. And our team is playing, and we're penalizing ourselves. The manager, I'm the manager. I've just penalized our players, our team. I've just taken one of our best players out of our lineup, and it goes on and on and on. And I mean, I'm just sweating out, and finally, I can, as you mentioned, I can visualize where I was at the time. I was at my house. We had an afternoon game that day, and I'd been talking to Phil Esposito, and then we finally consummated the day. That was like, talk about taking the proverbial piano off your back. That was like, oh my God, never going to do that again. So it turned out to be great. I mean, Mike Ridley and Kelly Miller, really good players for our team in so many different ways. It was almost like you were getting, you got 2 guys back, but it was terrific. It worked out really good, but that was I don't ever want to do that again, to kick a guy off the team and then wait 2 or 3 months before you make the deal. That was hard.
It's kind of fitting that it happened on New Year's Day, given everything that you just said too. And then the summer of, you did a lot of these deals on draft day. It seemed like the Dale Hunter swap,
right?
Getting Malarchuk and Clint Malarchuk and Dale Hunter from Quebec for Gaetan Duchesne and Alan Hallworth, and a first-round pick that they used to take Joe Sakic. Was that one of those where you were waiting to see what was still on the table at that point of the draft, or was that deal going to go down?
And Dale was at the draft, by the way. It was in Detroit, and he was sitting with his good friend, who was Bobby Gould at the time. And so, we had talked about the deal, and we're waiting, and Joe Sakic, just get everything out here. That was our player to take too. And so, wow. I mean, just think of how that could have gone. But again, it was the timing. It was a time where our team was playing good. We're still really competitive, but we needed a change. We needed a jolt, and that was it. And so, no regrets there. Dale's one of my favorite players of all time and favorite people, and he brought something that we didn't have ever with the Caps, and I think it re-energized our team. It made a lot of guys a lot braver, more comfortable, and I mean, I would have hated to play against Dale Hunter. I was a dangerous every night playing against him, and he was a real good person and a real good player.
And a one-of-a-kind player, even to this day.
Yeah, right.
1,000 points, 3,000 penalty minutes. Nobody's ever going to do that again.
No.
He again. All of these trades are such game changers. And we don't have time to hit them all. The Greg Adams for Jeff Courtnall was an amazing deal. Claudio Scremin to Minnesota, who hadn't even he had been drafted, hadn't played, was still in college. You get Don Beaupre for him, and Beaupre goes to Baltimore. Was trying to resurrect his career. He kind of hit hard times with the North Stars. A few months later, pops up, gets a start, and winds up keeping the net for probably 5 years or so, and Ole Kolzig years later winds up breaking his record. What goes in? There was a lot of goaltender movement during your time. What was your philosophy with trying to put together a goaltending tandem? Because those were pretty common in those days too.
Yeah, we again, we had some really good regular season success. We didn't have as much success in the playoffs as I think we should have had. One of the areas, and with trying to be as respectful as I can, is we thought we needed to get a little bit better goaltending. In the 1 year, we drafted 2 goaltenders in the first round in Defoe and Kolzig, which is unheard of, but that's throwing some quantity at some quality, and it's and it worked out really.
You hit on both of them.
Really good. So we'd hit on a lot of things. I mean, we're scoring lots of goals, or we had some really good defense. But again, I think we could have been a little bit better in our goaltending, and that was a good decision to make. And when I got into the Hockey Hall of Fame, Wally sent me a text just saying thank you for drafting him. He says thank you for being patient with me. It took a little bit longer than both you and I thought, but it all worked out, and that's exactly what happened.
And the trade deadline in 1989. You alluded to it, that getting Calle Johansson from Buffalo, massive trade in franchise history. Same day, you engineer a deal that includes 3 future Hall of Famers. There's only been 2 of these trades in NHL history. You and Harry Sinden are the guys that put these together. Mike Gartner and Larry Murphy to Minnesota for Dino Ciccarelli. How did that one come together? We weren't playing as well. It's always a reason. I mean, again, that's a deal. Do you have to make this deal? I mean, it's Ciccarelli for Gardner. I mean, both in the Hall of Fame. They're both right wingers. I mean, all I can really say is that they were both goal scorers, but they were completely different types of personalities, completely different types of players. They both brought lots to the table, and and I don't ever want to use the word, or don't like using the word, change for change's sake, but we needed that. And at that time, Dino brought a lot of pizzazz to our team that maybe was missing, maybe a little bit like a Dale Hunter type of a situation. And, he's a guy that rallies the team behind him because of how he plays. He becomes a fan favorite, and, it's fun to watch him play. He's a reckless player, and he's always in the middle of something. And, players have to, because he's not too big, they always have to defend him or support him, I should say. And it was just a deal we had to change at that time, is how I felt. And the last trade you made here was honestly, to this day, and it's more than a quarter of a century ago, it's one of the biggest trades in franchise history, and there haven't been many of them since. I mean, this is kind of a dinosaur trade. The trade with the Bruins, Adam Oates, Bill Ranford, and Rick Tocchet coming to Washington for Jason Allison, Anson Carter, and Jim Carey, who had just won the Vezina recently, and Carey was drafted maybe a year or 2 after the Defoe and Kolzig. So you guys, that's when the stable of Washington Capitals goaltending sort of started getting built, and it kept a pace for probably 3 decades after that. But that deal, I always wonder how that deal would have turned out, or how that season would have turned out if Adam Oates had reported right away. There were a couple of games there where he didn't. He wanted a little renegotiation of his contract, I think, in the middle of the season there, and didn't show up for a couple of games. Rick Tocchet was ailing when that deal was made, and he wasn't on the ice for the first few games as well. I feel like you guys just missed the playoffs that year, a couple of points, and I always wondered what
sounds like you've been leading my life. That's exactly what happened. That was a huge trade for both sides, and again, I agree with you. Like, we had a little bit of a contractual thing with Adam, and it was just unfortunate because we were a really good team. We didn't make the playoffs by just a couple of points, and we lost a couple of those games when he wasn't there. Like my memory is some team, Islanders, and like a 1-0 game, which we should have won, and we would have won, type of thing. So these are the things that leave a little bit of a mark to you, because then I lost my job after that season, and next year we go to the Stanley Cup Finals. So we had a good team. We had a really good team, and Jason Allison is what a different type of a player, but really, really good. Went on to score 100 points in the league and stuff like that, and just that was a pretty big trade.
How is it watching that team in the Cup final, knowing that you were kind of the architect, you were the guy who
was all really good. I mean, I'd moved on. I mean, I don't think you ever move on. I mean, I just think there's always part of me that is and always wants to be part of the Caps. I mean, I'm very proud of my years with the Caps. So I was very, very happy for them, as I am as we go along. And I received a phone call when it was all over from George McPhee. It was totally unnecessary. And he said, "David, thank you very much. Stanley Cup Finals. This was your team, David. This was not my team." And I really appreciated that, and it meant a lot to hear that from George.
What are you? It's only been a little over a month since you were inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. What are you going to remember about that weekend and that whole experience?
So many things. They did a fantastic job. Of course, right at the top of the list is my family, which, again, there's no question when you're doing this job for as long as I've done it, you've missed some really important things, and it's been huge sacrifices. So it was huge to have all my family. I don't have a huge family, but 3 grandkids, 2 kids, some cousins, and it meant a lot. And my wife, we've been together for 52 years, so it meant a huge amount for all that. It just, it's the pinnacle of your career. It just, like, you can't even believe it. Like, I was in the middle of my speech. They always say you're going to have a Hall of Fame moment. What was your moment? Well, my moment was right in the middle of my speech, where I was just lost my train of thought. I felt like a minute, and I'm sure it was 3 or 4 seconds, where I can't believe it. I'm in the Hockey Hall of Fame. If I had it to do over again, I would have just stopped and looked out at the audience and said, "I just realized I'm in the Hockey Hall of Fame." So it's fantastic. And I said in my speech too, is like, yes, I know I worked hard, and I know I gave everything I had to the game of hockey, but the game of hockey has given me and my family so much more.
That's a two-way street, because you gave the Washington Capitals a lot, and it's great to see you get in, and it's great that you're here today with Mike Gartner, who was the first Washington Capitals drafted player to ever get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I love that both of you guys are on the selection committee as well, because I know the respect that both of you have for the game and for the institution of the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I encourage anyone who's never been to go and visit it. It's a great institution. It does right by the game, and it's time well spent at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. And thank you, David, for spending some time with us today. It's meant the world to hear your perspective on so many of the things that kept this franchise going when, honestly, it could have gone in the wrong direction. Certainly in that summer of '82, there was a lot of fortuitous events that took place, and I think it's remarkable that Dick and Lou are still here so many years later. The 3 of you guys, I think, are owed a great debt by all Caps fans for keeping this team here and keeping this team and making this team viable. So thank you.
Well, that's very nice. I really appreciate that. That's terrific, and we should talk more, because it sounds like we might be the historians of the team. I mean, your knowledge and of all the events is remarkable, and you brought some things up in this interview that even I had forgotten for a little bit. So I really appreciate that. It was nice walking down memory lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you as well.